prove that it was like a criminal enterprise was a very high bar.
George was a juror in the Sean Combs criminal trial. After sitting for nearly 2 months, listening to 34 witnesses, he found out he was an alternate and sent home at deliberation time.
So what did you think of the verdict then?
I understood the verdict.
What would you say to those people who think that the jury got it wrong?
The charges of trafficking, they were more difficult, and the standard of proof was very.
In a shocking twist that's sending tremors through both Hollywood and the courtroom, a member of the jury in the Sean Diddy Combs trial has reportedly broken silence. And what they revealed could change everything. Could Diddy actually walk free sooner than anyone expected?
I have a lot of people who have asked me for pardons. I call him Puff Daddy has asked me for a pardon.
Just 3 days after Diddy was sentenced to over 4 years in prison on prostitution charges, President Donald Trump seems to confirm he's heard from the mogul's legal team.
So, I told you, the head of the Union Pacific Railroad said, "Sir, save Chicago. It's a great city. It's going to be lost if you don't do it." We have no choice but to do this. And when judges give us rulings that, you don't have to do it, Portland is on fire. Portland's been on fire for years, and not so much saving it. We have to save something else, because I think that's all insurrection. I really think that's really criminal insurrection. So I appreciate the question. These are unsafe places. We're going to make them safe.
And invoke the Insurrection Act, sir.
What?
The Insurrection Act, under what conditions or terms would you invoke?
Well, I'd do it if it was necessary. So far it hasn't been necessary, but we have an Insurrection Act for a reason. If I had to enact it, I'd do that. If people were being killed and courts were holding us up, or governors or mayors were holding us up, sure, I'd do that. I mean, I want to make sure that people aren't killed. We have to make sure that our cities are safe. And it's turning out, and we started with D.C. It's been so successful. Think of it. People wouldn't go to restaurants. The restaurants were closing. We were losing a lot of restaurants, as you all know. And now restaurants are opening and they're thriving. Not only is it not under control, it's the opposite. And I believe they're afraid. They're scared for their lives. You look at what's happened with Portland over the years. It's a burning hellhole. And then you have a judge that lost her way, that tries to pretend that like there's no problem. Actually, she's not even saying that. There's a huge problem in Portland. I'll tell you what the problem is: crime. Okay, crime. There's a huge problem in Chicago. It's called crime. And we want to put out the crime, and they want to inflame the crime.
Mr. President, Governor Abbott offered up the Texas National Guard to you. Have you had any other conversations with other red state governors?
Yeah, I have. They're willing to offer. Every one of them is willing to offer whatever we need. We thank Governor Abbott of Texas. Every one of the red state, as you call them, red state governors, is willing to give whatever we need, because they want our agents protected. These ICE agents have a tough job. They have to go in and get, in many cases, stone cold criminals, hardened criminals, long-time criminals. And every, essentially, Republican governor has offered up whatever we need. And some Democratic governors also. Daniel?
Yeah. The Supreme Court is back in session. Yeah. They rejected today an appeal by Ghislaine Maxwell to overturn her conviction. That means her only chance at getting out of prison is a pardon from you. Is that something you're open to?
Who are we talking about?
Ghislaine Maxwell.
I haven't heard the name in so long. I can say this, that I'd have to take a look at it. I would have to take a look. Did they reject that?
She wanted to appeal her conviction.
And what happened?
They said that they were not going to hear her appeal.
I see. Well, I'll take a look at it. I will speak to the DOJ. I wouldn't consider it or not consider it. I don't know anything about it. But I will speak to the DOJ.
Why would she be a candidate for clemency, sir?
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to speak to the DOJ. I'll look at it. I have a lot of people who have asked me for pardons. I call him Puff Daddy has asked me for a pardon.
But she was convicted of child sex trafficking.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to take a look at it. I'd have to ask DOJ.
Recent years, as Diddy really entered the political realm. There's a video where he's speaking to radio host Charlemagne saying, if Trump gets elected, I really do believe in my heart there'll be a race war. In another video on Revolt, he says white men like Trump need to be banished. And by the way, you know who's not letting anyone forget this? Combs' rival 50 Cent. took to social media recently, wrote, "See, Trump don't like S like this, buddy. You run your mouth too much." And Donald doesn't take well to disrespect and doesn't forget who chooses to go against him. While working tirelessly to make America great again, there is no room for distraction. He would consider pardoning anyone who was being mistreated, not Puff Daddy. And let me tell you, the idea of Trump pardoning Diddy is not getting a ton of love out there. Conservative commentator Megyn Kelly posted on X, "Trump should not pardon Diddy. He doesn't deserve it. He's a Trump hater. He's a woman abuser. MAGA is already upset over elites seeming to cover for each other. This would not help. GOP struggling with young female voters, most of whom will hate a Diddy pardon." And then you just had other random accounts like America First. What? He's actually considering this? Diddy is a depraved, abusive, sexual deviant who should be spending the rest of his life in prison. If Trump pardons him, he will get absolutely crushed. Who is advising him lately? It's looking like straight up sabotage at this point. There were other accounts that were not in favor of it, although there was this account. Milo posted on X, "Trump has no choice but to pardon Diddy after the government, led by James Comey's daughter Maureen, simply lost interest in Diddy's guilt the moment they secured his tapes incriminating powerful Democrats. The prosecution was a shambles. The trial was a farce." Now, I want to talk about if this is really going to happen, how it would happen. Also, if it really depends on bail and sentencing, then what are we talking about? And I have somebody who not only has been following the Diddy case from the very beginning, not only is a renowned criminal defense attorney, but actually has obtained federal pardons from the president, including from Donald Trump. By the way, for his clients Kodak Black and Lil Wayne, those were maybe the most notable. I'm joined by Bradford Cohen. Bradford, thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jess.
Now, before I even get into the pardon, okay, there was a bit of breaking news before we were going to come on. This is what I want to get your opinion on first. So Combs' defense team filed a memo in support of a motion for judgment of acquittal, or in the alternative, a motion for a new trial. And basically, I know you read through it, but basically the evidence, they would say, is insufficient to sustain that conviction. Their main arguments is really echoing what we've talked about a little bit when it came to the bail analysis, but that his prosecution, his conviction on these Mann Act prostitution charges is so unique. He wasn't profiting off of this business. All consenting adults were involved. The jury didn't find that there was any sex trafficking. They argued this isn't even prostitution per se, it's voyeurism, that the intent wasn't for people to travel for sex for money, but he paid them for their time. Everybody was having a good time. He makes a First Amendment argument that the freak-offs and the hotel nights were performances that were typically videotaped so they could watch them later on. It's just amateur pornography. And then finally makes the argument that he was prejudiced because of all the other evidence that came in to prove RICO or sex trafficking, and would have never came in if he was merely being prosecuted for prostitution, particularly the Intercontinental Hotel footage of him purporting to beat up Cassie Ventura Fine. And he says, at the very least, he needs a new trial. I hand it over to you. You think this is a successful argument?
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if it's going to be successful in the judgment of acquittal. I think the argument is...
Hours after the judge handed down a harsh sentence, Diddy's legal team moved fast, filing an emergency appeal in what insiders are calling one of the most aggressive defense strategies in celebrity history. But as the legal chaos unfolded, one juror's anonymous comments started circulating online, and those few words raised more questions than answers. The juror reportedly claimed that the panel was divided on several key points, especially regarding Diddy's intent and alleged role in the controversial charges. One line stood out: not everyone believed the government's timeline. That one statement could become a weapon in Diddy's appeal. Behind the scenes, Diddy's attorneys are reportedly using that juror comment to build a case for procedural error, an argument that could invalidate part of the verdict. Legal experts say if the appeal judge finds bias or improper handling, the case could be reopened, or worse for prosecutors, retried entirely. But here's where the story gets even more explosive. Just as the appeal was filed, former President Donald Trump made an offhand remark during a public Q&A, something that immediately set the internet on
sexual exploits. Obviously, that's not the case here. It's used so infrequently, it might have been a handful of people were actually charged with the Mann Act. No one in custody currently has ever been convicted of the Mann Act. So it's an interesting argument to say, hey, listen, this Mann Act, the original reason for it was racist. The original way that it was applied was racist. The way it's applied here is incorrect because he was not making any money from quote unquote pimping or getting these women across, or men getting them across state lines. None of that was being done. This was all being done for entertainment purposes. So it's an interesting argument. I don't think this judge buys it. It might be interesting on an appeal, but I don't think the judge is going to give him a judgment of acquittal on those 2 counts based on the argument. Now, the more interesting argument to me, and it's their last argument for new trial, is that, listen, if you were just going to charge him with these 2 counts, which I originally said when I looked at all the evidence, and don't forget, I was getting calls during this trial from individuals that were telling me, hey, I have information that exonerates what they're saying against Sean Combs, essentially saying that Cassie and others were participating more than just having sex in a room. They were participating more than that. They were paying people. They were hiring people. They were sending me pictures even when Diddy wasn't around. They were asking me to come over even when Diddy wasn't around. These were what these witnesses were telling me, which is really Brady evidence. And I don't know if that was ever turned over. But the more interesting argument is that all these counts were charged. The only thing he was convicted of were the Mann Acts. And he probably wouldn't have been convicted of these Mann Acts, but for all this other stuff that came in to try and prove these counts that they could not prove and did not have a basis for bringing.
Let me just challenge you on that, because this is a jury who didn't find that there was sex trafficking. And I can't confirm that they found him guilty of the Mann Act because of the hotel video or anything else. I mean, it seems to me that they might have convicted him on that based on the travel records, the payment receipts, all about that. Not even necessarily allegations of violence. I mean, do you think that it was because of, let's say, the Intercontinental Hotel video that he was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution? It always felt to me that they proved that charge based purely on, the documents.
Well, I always feel like during a trial, whenever you get a guilty verdict on one of the counts or 2 of the counts out of 6 or 7, you think to yourself, is it because of these other things that they brought up? How bad he is, he's not a good guy, the video came out. Sometimes juries will split the baby, meaning, there's people that want to convict, there's people that don't want to convict, and they're like, okay, let's convict him on these acts. We can all agree we can convict him on these acts. He's not a good guy. He transported these women, these men across state lines. Let's convict him on this. There's always going to be a question of that. The only way to not have a question of that, obviously, is when the jury comes out, someone gives an interview and says, hey, this is why we did it, is because, this tape was so bad and these other incidents were so bad that we were like, we can't just let him walk with nothing. So we convicted him on the Mann Acts. Now, we don't have a juror saying that. Do I think eventually jurors are going to start coming out? Yeah, I think so. I think some of these jurors are going to come out. They're going to want to do some interviews, not before sentencing. And I think after sentencing, I think some of them will come out and we'll discuss it, because I think that was the feeling I was getting from this jury and the reaction.
Out of New York City, we are hearing Diddy's attorneys speaking to the media after he was sentenced earlier today. This is live.
Yeah, we are planning to appeal. Man, I want to hear them, bro. We are planning to appeal. We think we have strong bases to appeal. The strongest basis is that the jury reached a verdict on coercion. It found there was not coercion, and I think the judge said coercion today as a basis for a sentence at least a dozen times. We think that is unconstitutional. We think that a jury verdict should mean more than our jury's verdict seems to mean, and so we are planning to appeal.
Absolutely. Filed a cross appeal. What would happen in that regard if they filed a cross appeal and then Sean Diddy Combs get a higher sentence?
He would not get a higher sentence, and they're not gonna cross appeal. We're gonna appeal. We think we're right, and they'll respond to the appeal, and it'll be decided by the Second Circuit as soon as.
Tell us about the conversation you had with your client after the sentencing. Consensual. The judge clearly thought the sexual encounters weren't consensual.
Because he's biased.
What did you make of his remarks?
He's biased. If anyone, I'm happy to go. So we think that's just absolutely inconsistent with the jury's verdict. I mean, the jury's verdict was resoundingly clear. There was no sex trafficking. There was no racketeering. Everything was consensual. Everything was adult, which is why he was convicted only of the prostitution offense. What we feel happened today was that the judge acted as a 13th juror, one that we did not choose, and that he second-guessed the jury's verdict.
Well, at least the judge was open-minded. At least the judge was open-minded for both sides. He gave consideration.
Did you have a chance to talk to Sean Combs? Did you have a chance to talk to your client? Can you tell us about the conversation after the sentence here?
How was he?
How's your client?
How would it impact sex workers?
But he's okay to push back a little. But he's okay.
Come on, man.
Stop pushing people, y'all.
Y'all making this a circus now, bro.
Space out. He does feel justice was served, though. He said he takes accountability, and I felt like Diddy definitely took accountability for everything, sir. And I would like to just let you know that everything was not consensual, sir. Please don't say that. It was not consensual. Even Diddy admitted
this is the defense team, man. Let's answer the question.
Yes, but he did allegedly.
All right, Queen. All right, Queen. All right, Queen.
Mark, can you talk to us about talking to Sean after?
We're clearly all talking about domestic violence.
I'm not. Obviously, we spoke to Sean. I'm not going to talk about what Sean and we discussed. It's obviously a privilege.
We all feel comfortable bringing.
And tell us what location are you going to recommend?
No matter which community it impacts.
What are the next steps?
Why weren't the sex workers on trial today?
Hey,
hold on, bro. Where were the escorts? Stop, bro.
Thank you, guys.
Here's the question I heard is what's next?
Why weren't the escorts leaking?
We're going to try and find the right facility for Mr. Combs. We're going to ask the judge to recommend that. We are very serious about pursuing an appeal. So we have a number of things all going on at the same time. I think that's all for me.
And you got about 14 days to start doing that?
If my colleagues want to continue to ask questions.
Put that in motion.
Thank you, sir.
14 days to put that in motion.
Thank you, guys. Great job, guys.
Sean Diddy Combs' legal team, including Mark Agnafilo, speaking there. Looked like some of the... Couldn't tell if those were reporters or some of the people that were in that gaggle, getting a little bit testy with some of the people with the mic. Live look at Lady Liberty on this Friday evening, 7:07 in the Big Apple. We'll bring you any more developments as it relates to the Diddy sentencing. Of course, we were waiting to hear from Diddy's legal team. If we see anybody else step up to that podium, we'll bring it to you live.
Which does not wipe the crime off your record, it just allows you to get out of jail. So he has that option to give him a commutation. If he gets sentenced, he can also give him a commutation. But as for the process, there's an application on the DOJ website, and I'm part of some charities that also do a lot of pro bono work for pardons and commutations. You can fill out this form, DOJ website. It essentially lists the reasons why you should get a pardon, what kind of community service you've done, things of that nature. There's a separate application for commutation, but you can file a pardon application, and you can also say, hey, listen, if it's not a pardon, I'm looking for a commutation. You attach your indictment, you would reasons why you feel your crime was you were unfairly prejudiced or unfairly convicted. All of those things go into the packet. I always try to help people that are filling it out on their own to show them, what to point out. Those type of cases are always heartening because those people deserve pardons. They deserve commutations if they're in and it's some sort of crazy drug offense that was brought up in the 90s. All of those things are reasons for pardons and commutations.
So is this real? I mean, here's the thing. He is in a much better position to get a pardon or a commutation of his sentence because he wasn't convicted of sex trafficking and racketeering. There is a way to justify this based on some of the arguments I just mentioned that his defense team is making that maybe he shouldn't have been brought up on this. The I Mann Act, not as serious as what he's facing. Is this real? Do you think that this is going to happen? That he's going to get a pardon or a commutation from President Trump?
So I don't know if he's going to get one. I do think that it's real because, like I said before, President Trump, whether they like him, don't like him, if he feels something is wrong, and we've seen this happen before in the past, if he feels something is wrong, someone got railroaded, someone was convicted, wrongfully, he will take a look at that. Yeah, Sean Combs has said things in the past that probably were not great. I've read them, but I think that if anyone understands that, I mean, look at President Trump's cabinet. There's individuals on his cabinet. His vice president has said things in the past that weren't great for him. But he understands that people evolve, people change their minds. People understand that there's certain requirements, things that are going on, certain pressures that they're under. And I don't think that would affect whether or not he would grant a pardon or commutation based on things that were said in the past. I think it would be based on what he gets sentenced to, or based on the facts of the Mann Act, that the Mann Act itself, I think, is unconstitutional. I think there's issues the way that it was applied in this case.
But from an optics point of view,
of instances of violence, etc. But she's choked. She looks a certain way physically because of the injuries, and she's still being required to do this. And he is saying more emphatically that thou shalt, you have to do this. And so, yeah, that's a little bit more like it in terms of you looking at the force part of this particular crime.
I'll tell you what's important. I think this is important. So we're talking multiple sex workers or male performers being allegedly used here. I believe we have names or nicknames like Don, Cabral, Leo, Antoine, Paul. And there was testimony about how the men were flown out and how they were paid. Like this back and forth. She was asked, do you know how Cabral got from Atlanta to each of these cities? By plane. Do you know who paid for his plane ticket? Maybe either me or sometimes Jess. Who is Jess? The travel agent. Whose travel agent? Sean's. In what cities or countries do you remember seeing Paul for these hotel nights? I remember seeing Paul in Los Angeles, Miami, and Turks. Although she did testify that he apparently booked his own travel or was already there. But she testified that she saw Combs hand cash to the male performers. She testified that Combs' security or assistants like Christina Coram would give him cash. She testified that she helped to pick the performers and even arrange for the flights of one male performer named Sly from Atlanta to New York, and she paid him $2,000 to $4,000. She claims that she got the money from Combs. She testified how Combs arranged performers to come over too, and she testified that the assistants had set up the rooms. Now, Joe, to me, does this all help a clear-cut case of transportation to engage in prostitution? One of the charges that Sean Combs faces, he actually faces two, one with respect to Cassie and one with respect to Jane. Does this support this? Does it support maybe even racketeering as we talk about the people in his inner circle?
I would say it absolutely supports transportation. And we've talked about this before, the whole idea that if you cut away the crimes and you're looking at the possibilities related to them, you would seem to have transportation because clearly they're flying people from one place to another, arranging for people's flights. These are people that you don't otherwise know, other than for their reputation as sex workers, if that. And you're flying them out there, and then you're paying them once they get in and have them engage in sex acts. So, yeah, I think that there's an argument there. Now, the racketeering, perhaps. I've always thought that this was more of the square peg in a round hole kind of situation. But that being said, you're still looking to show him as having a criminal enterprise, right? And the racketeering, you need the two underlying acts. And it may be that, there's a garden variety of acts that you can use to be your two underlying crimes, right? And so what it may do is help to, quote, kill two birds with one stone, for lack of a better term, in terms of being one of the underlying crimes. So, yes, I think it gets you on the road towards the racketeering. But I would say that if there was something that is, quote, easier, and I don't know that anything's easy here, one that's more clear, I like that word better, that's more clearly shown here, I think there's an argument that you show pretty well the transportation with intent to engage in prostitution.
Joe, the defense cross-examined Jane a lot about all of this, and you talked about it. They questioned if she did this out of love and just to please her lover, Sean Combs, not necessarily being pressured as a victim of sex trafficking. She was questioned how when she got mad at him, it was a lot about, other women. So, they always talked about this as more of a relationship of jealousy and anger, not sex trafficking. There were definitely texts where she was complaining to Sean Combs about doing all of this, but still, what she allegedly kept on doing it, that she was given money, that he paid her rent, even to this day, that he pays for her lawyer. She was pressed on saying how this one hotel night in Turks and Caicos.
Different ways. There are discussions where she's asking about using condoms. Clearly, that's something that she expressed a preference to wanting to do. Okay. Is that enough for the jury? The fact that he did not seem to approve of them. Okay. Or do we go the other way when we don't see her issuing an ultimatum saying, I can't do this if we're not using condoms, or having him even emphatically say no. He seems to express a preference, but does he emphatically say no? Does he threaten her if they don't use the condoms? Is there something else that makes it more final where she can see in both actuality and perception that she either does not use the condoms or else? So if someone is inclined one way or the other, I think you have evidence that you can take from their conversations to go either way. And that's what makes this difficult.
Joe, you know, she described in graphic detail how these sessions would end with the men, right? How they would finish up, and let's just say how Combs, according to her, didn't want her to clean up, and then they would have sex. You know, she and Combs would have sex after. And she even testified it was these moments with Combs that were the ones that she really enjoyed. She just wanted to be with him. That level of detail, that helps her credibility, right? And it doesn't appear that the defense is saying so much that this stuff didn't happen.
Yeah, I think it does help her credibility because it makes her more vulnerable and more honest. This is not something that somebody wants to sit on the stand and talk about. She clearly loved this man. She clearly wanted to be with him, and that comes through. And so the humanization, I think, is really important. She wasn't just a machine and just a robot, et cetera. But you also can take different things from that as well. But her honesty is really important. Stepping back, if a jury is trying to figure out what all of this means, they're going to ask themselves, what is she saying? Why would she testify as to this? This seems to be nasty and crazy and maybe even a little demented, but she's owning up to it. So maybe we ought to believe her. So from that may come that the jury is more inclined to believe her.
And the defense might not even be trying to say, hey, this didn't happen like you described. They might be saying, okay, yeah, this happened, but you know what? You're being called as a prosecution witness, and the prosecution is improperly transforming your testimony into sex trafficking and racketeering. And they might not be being incredibly aggressive with her on these details. They might be accepting these details as true, but just saying it's not a sex trafficker-victim relationship, but it's a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. However, the details of this are important because you wonder if the jury's going to say, you know, maybe how they might be looking at Cassie and saying, could she really have consented to all this? Because let's talk about the